Welcome to Biden Brief. If you want a centrist Republican, vote Trump. Telegraph. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has again made headlines, this time for his moderate views on abortion and support for striking union workers. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Trump called for negotiations on the issue of abortion and criticized a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. The following day, it was announced that Trump would be joining striking auto workers in Detroit. These actions set him apart from other Republican candidates and show a willingness to appeal to moderate voters. Trump has a history of adopting popular positions to bolster his support. Migrant child drowns as family tries to cross river near Texas barrier. The Independent. A young child has died while attempting to cross the Rio Grande near a floating barrier ordered by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. The incident occurred on Wednesday when strong currents swept the 3-year-old boy away. Despite being located by a tactical marine unit, he later died in hospital. Abbott had controversially installed the floating barrier of buoys in July to deter migrants from crossing into Texas. Another body was found in the same area on Thursday. Earlier this month, a federal judge ordered Texas to move the buoys by September 15 after a lawsuit filed by the Biden administration argued that the barrier increased the risk of drowning for migrants. Harris allies and key Democrats rally around Vice President amid party hand-wringing. CNN. Allies of Vice President Kamala Harris and other prominent Democrats are sending a clear message to their fellow party members who speculate that she should be replaced as President Joe Biden's running mate in 2024. It's time to stop it. It's not only a distraction, it's offensive, Maryland Governor Wes Moore told CNN in an interview. The vice president has faced renewed calls from some pundits and columnists to be dropped from the ticket amid heightened concerns about the president's age and doubts over her ability to lead if Biden were no longer able. It's at least the second major go-around of questioning whether Harris's rightful place is by Biden's side for the 2024 contentious race, leaving her office tired of the fraught conversation, according to a person familiar with the dynamic. Everybody's sort of over it, the person said. The feeling is shared across most of the Democratic spectrum, who hope the party turns their sights on former President Donald Trump or whomever the Republican presidential nominee will be, instead of hand-wringing about themselves. A source close to the Biden campaign told CNN, "People need to get on board and recognize every time they undermine the vice president, they undermine the campaign. We cannot afford to lose to these Republicans. So, get on board." There have both been private and public efforts to deliver this message. Privately, according to a person familiar with campaign operations, the Biden campaign contacted both former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Representative Jamie Raskin, a Maryland Democrat, after neither directly answer repeated questions from CNN about whether Harris was the best running mate for Biden on the 2024 ticket. The campaign asked Pelosi and Raskin to clarify their comments, and both lawmakers later cleaned up their remarks to offer direct messages of support. Raskin told CNN in a follow-up statement Friday that Vice President Harris has excelled in perhaps the most ambiguous and challenging job in our constitutional system, and she is unquestionably the best running mate for President Biden in 2024. Pelosi's office offered no additional statement but pointed CNN to the praise Pelosi heaped on Harris in her interview, saying she's very politically astute. "I don't think people give her enough credit." Discussions on how best to shepherd the party along are also happening among groups like the Congressional Black Caucus, who are actively talking about how to combat the replacement chatter and other attacks against the vice president, according to a source familiar with the effort. "Some of us need to say that they are acting in many ways like agents for the MAGA crowd," Reverend Al Sharpton told CNN. He plans to call on Democrats to stop during CBC weekend in Washington, D.C. "I can only think that they are either politically stupid or working for the opposition." And according to conversations with more than a dozen Democratic strategists, elected officials, and people close to the vice president, many will join Sharpton in urging Democrats to stop their groaning over the Biden-Harris ticket and end the chatter of potentially replacing the vice president. Publicly, key Democrats have come out to support Harris, casting the lingering doubt as harmful to Biden and his 2024 chances. California Governor Gavin Newsom said of course Harris should be the Democratic 2024 vice presidential nominee. Newsom and Harris are old friends, and sometimes frenemies. "I mean, by definition, if I think this administration lasts 2.5 years, has been one of the most outstanding administrations the last few decades. And she's a member of that administration, she gets to lay and claim credit to a lot of that success." The answer is absolutely, he said in an interview to CNN earlier this week. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Massachusetts Democrat and a former rival who was once iced out by the vice president for her lukewarm support, said Thursday she was proud to support Harris's campaign with Biden. Vice President Harris is a passionate, clear, unyielding advocate for Americans' freedoms, leading the administration's efforts to protect reproductive freedom and strengthen voting rights, Warren said in a statement. I am proud to support her campaign with President Biden, and I'm confident that the administration's record of delivering for American families will lead them to victory in 2024. There's a lot of people in Washington who would love that job. Many who CNN spoke to believe the origins of the doubt come from a place of misogyny, racism, or jealousy from other Democrats who wish they were in the vice president's spot. Harris is the first woman and first Black and South Asian person in her role. There's a lot of people in Washington who would love that job, said Jim Messina, a Democratic operative who ran Barack Obama's 2012 campaign. I think that a lot of the criticism at the vice president is borderline misogynistic, and there's a lot of people who judge her harder than they would judge a male politician in that role. Moore, the only Black governor in the U.S., said, the attacks on her, they hit different, they hit our ears differently. And I think people should remember that. But others cite Harris's low poll numbers and history of gaffes as reasons to take a second look at her position. 3 prominent political columnists collectively suggested politicians like Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, Representative Lauren Underwood of Illinois, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, and Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia as possibilities to replace Harris. Contacted by CNN, each Democrat rejected the notion. I absolutely do not think Vice President Harris should be dropped, Raimondo told CNN directly. I fully support Vice President Harris on the ticket. I think she is doing an incredible job as vice president and is a strong leader for our country. Governor Whitmer supports President Biden and Vice President Harris, a spokesperson for the Michigan governor responded. I've seen the vice president up close and in action in my state, and you couldn't contain the excitement in the room. I'm hard-pressed to imagine a better partner for President Biden, Warnock told CNN. Kamala Harris is a tremendous leader. I was proud to introduce the Momnibus with her and am pleased we can continue to work together to end disparities in maternal health. I am on Team Biden-Harris and enthusiastically support their re-election in 2024, Underwood said in a statement. Any assertion that there is anyone better qualified to run on the Democratic ticket other than President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris is absolutely ludicrous. I am excited to do my part to ensure that they are both re-elected so that we can continue delivering for the people of this country, Bass said in a statement. Harris keeps her head down. It's unclear whether the latest round of coalescing behind the vice president will be enough to stop all the hand-wringing. Harris and the Biden administration have spent the last several months trying to build up her public profile, bolstering her public schedule to include stops focused on the hot 2024 issue of abortion, as well as being the first in-line responder to GOP attacks on freedom. On Thursday, the White House announced she would serve as the head of a newly launched, first-of-its-kind White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, the latest step in the Biden administration's efforts to enact meaningful gun control against the backdrop of a deadlocked Congress. Harris has also beefed up her fundraising efforts, a key signal of her expanded role in the campaign. Biden aides see their path to victory next year embedded firmly in their ability to secure Black voters, women, young people, and other groups that tend to respond warmly to Harris. But this most recent round of speculation comes as Republicans have frequently made Harris a central figure in their campaign trail attacks, with some, such as former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, insinuating that this upcoming election is really about the vice president due to Biden's age. Asked earlier this month about her reaction to constant critiques, Harris said in an interview that it was not new. They feel the need to attack because they're scared that we will win based on the merit of the work that Joe Biden and I, and our administration, has done, she added. More recently, during a conversation at a Pennsylvania community college on voting rights, Harris did not directly reference the rumbles over her place on the ticket. But in a thinly veiled moment, Harris called those who once doubted her and then candidate Biden's 2020 bid, haters. So, when people turned out in 2020, even though they were the doubters, I would say, some of the haters. Let's keep it real, Harris said, with some laughter. There was record turnout, and it's because you voted that Joe Biden's president of the United States and I'm vice president of the United States, she added to a crowd of younger voters. It was reflective of what appears to be her office's larger say-nothing stance, at least publicly. They've been in the mode of, they're ignoring it, one source familiar with Harris's office told CNN. And those close to Harris say, though she's generally very aware of what people are saying, it's unlikely she'll proactively address the calls for her to leave the ticket. Instead, she'll work through it. I think she keeps her head down and keep working, Sharpton told CNN. The Palestinians must not have veto over Arab-Israel deals, Netanyahu tells UN. Al Jazeera. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has praised recent normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states, stating that Palestinians should not have a veto over the deals. Speaking to the United Nations General Assembly, Netanyahu said that Palestinians could benefit from broader peace in the region but should not have the power to block such agreements. He highlighted the potential for a formal diplomatic agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, arguing that this would transform the Middle East and encourage other Arab states to normalize relations with Israel. Netanyahu also commended U.S. President Joe Biden for his efforts to secure an Israel-Saudi Arabia deal. Despite previous clashes between the two leaders, Netanyahu praised Biden's commitment to the agreement, which reportedly involves U.S. security guarantees to Saudi Arabia. Netanyahu also criticized Iran and argued for a strong international response to curb Tehran's nuclear program. He called for the reimposition of sanctions and for Iran to face a credible nuclear threat. U.S. will send Ukraine ATACMS long-range missiles, Biden tells Zelensky. NBC. Reuters. U.S. President Joe Biden has reportedly informed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that the U.S. will provide Kyiv with ATACMS long-range missiles, according to NBC News. Kyiv has been requesting the missiles to help disrupt supply lines, air bases, and rail networks in Russian-occupied territory. The White House did not disclose any decision on ATACMS during Zelensky's visit to Washington, but it did announce a new $325 million military aid package for Ukraine. The Pentagon has not yet commented on the report. ATACMS missiles are designed for deep attacks on enemy forces and could be used to target command and control centers, air defenses, and logistics sites. During their meeting, Biden assured Zelensky of continued strong U.S. support for Ukraine's war against Russian invaders, despite opposition from some Republican lawmakers. Explainer: UAW expands strikes against GM, Stellantis in fight over new contract. Reuters. The United Auto Workers, UAW, has expanded its strike against General Motors, GM, and Stellantis but said that it has made progress in talks with Ford. The UAW is pushing automakers to eliminate the two-tier wage system, restore pay improvements and retiree benefits cut during the 2008 to 2009 economic crisis, and restore defined benefit pensions for all workers. The union is also seeking job security guarantees and an end to the use of temporary workers, as well as agreements to represent hourly workers at joint venture EV battery plants. Judge blocks government plan to scale back Gulf oil lease sale to protect whale species. Associated Press. A federal judge has ordered the Interior Department to expand next week's scheduled sale of Gulf of Mexico oil and gas leases by millions of acres, rejecting a scaled-back plan announced last month by the Biden administration as part of an effort to protect an endangered whale species. Chevron, Shell Offshore, the American Petroleum Institute and the state of Louisiana sued to reverse the cut in acreage and block the inclusion of the whale-protecting measures in the lease sale provisions. Biden trade chief says she's sympathetic to EU's China EV probe. Bloomberg. U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai expressed sympathy for the European Union's decision to investigate Chinese imports of subsidized electric vehicles, EVs. Tai acknowledged that global trade is not happening on a level playing field and that market-based democratic economies need to take action to defend their interests and ensure fair and free trade. The EU's probe could result in new tariffs on Chinese EV imports, affecting major non-European automakers like Tesla. Tai's comments come as governments in developed economies are rethinking their production strategies and looking to bring key sectors closer to home. Tai also mentioned ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and EU on clean steel and the review of tariffs on Chinese goods imposed by former President Donald Trump. U.S. says Haiti security mission could deploy in months, urges support. Al Jazeera. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that a Kenya-led international security mission to Haiti could deploy within months and called for the United Nations Security Council to authorize the deployment as soon as possible. Haiti has experienced a surge in gang violence in recent years, particularly following the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021. Gangs currently control most of the capital, Port-au-Prince, and armed confrontations have disrupted access to healthcare and other services. Kenyan authorities have said they are prepared to lead a multinational force in Haiti to help train and assist the local police in restoring normalcy. Biden and Lauren Boebert call out McCarthy for taking long weekend. The Independent. House Republicans, including far-right members of the party, are criticizing House Speaker Kevin McCarthy for allowing the House to end its business for the week and go on long weekends while a government shutdown looms. President Joe Biden and Republican Representative Lauren Boebert both criticized McCarthy's decision, with Boebert saying that Congress should not be sent home without passing individual appropriations bills. McCarthy faced another setback when 6 members of his own party joined Democrats in voting against a procedural vote to start debate on military funding. McCarthy is facing pressure from the far-right wing of the GOP to bring 12 appropriations bills up for a vote instead of one omnibus package, but it is unlikely that all the bills will pass before the October 1 deadline. U.S. close to providing Ukraine with long-range cluster missiles. Washington Post. The Biden administration is reportedly considering providing Ukraine with ATACMS long-range missiles armed with cluster bomblets. Cluster-armed ATACMS missiles could enable Ukraine to target command posts, ammunition stores, and logistics routes located behind Russian front lines and dug-in defenses. Ukraine has requested hundreds of missiles, and the cluster-armed version is more widely available than those armed with a single warhead. The U.S. administration has previously expressed concerns about the readiness of U.S. forces if the military stockpiles of ATACMS were drawn down. The Pentagon has not disclosed the number of ATACMS unitary warhead missiles in its arsenal. The Defense Department is planning to phase out ground-launched missiles later this year, replacing them with a new long-range system. The administration also announced an additional $325 million in weapons for Ukraine, including cluster munitions, artillery ammunition, and anti-armor capabilities, to strengthen Ukraine's defenses against Russia. The use of cluster munitions has been criticized by some governments and human rights groups. Taiwan needs our weapons, instead, we're sending them to bad guys. Telegraph. The U.S. has announced that it will redirect $85 million in foreign military financing from Egypt to Taiwan due to Egypt's human rights abuses. The move is seen as a step in the right direction, as it prioritizes weapons transfers to freer countries facing major security threats over repressive autocrats facing few external risks. The Biden administration's policy shift is long overdue, as previous administrations have sent weapons to some of the world's most oppressive dictators instead of aiding democracies. U.S. pledges new aid for Haiti, urges UN to authorize security mission. Reuters. The United States has pledged an additional $65 million in aid to Haiti's police force and called on the UN Security Council to formally support a multinational security mission to help combat gang violence in the country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated that the mission, led by Kenya, could be deployed within months and urged the Council to vote on a U.S.-drafted resolution in support of the deployment. While the U.S. will not be providing troops, Blinken said that the Biden administration will work with Congress to provide $100 million in logistical and financial support for the mission. The UN Secretary General has previously stated that a robust use of force by a multinational police deployment, supported by military assets, is needed to restore law and order in Haiti and disarm the gangs. U.S. Presidential Election 2024, dates, candidates and latest issues. Reuters. The 2024 U.S. presidential election is shaping up to be a unique contest. Former President Donald Trump is leading the field of Republican candidates, despite facing federal and state criminal charges related to his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. If Trump were to win, he would become the first president in 130 years to win a second term after sitting out a term. On the Democratic side, incumbent President Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee. If he were to win, he would be the oldest American ever to win a presidential election, as he will be 81 at the time of the election. However, there is a lack of enthusiasm among voters for a Biden-Trump rematch, which could open up opportunities for a third-party candidate. The key issues in the election include abortion, the economy, immigration, crime, and foreign policy. Key battleground states include Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. The Republican primaries will begin in January 2024, with the first Democratic primary in February. The general election will be held on November 5, 2024. Israel on cusp of region reshaping peace with Saudi Arabia, Netanyahu says. Reuters. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes that Israel is on the verge of achieving peace with Saudi Arabia, which could be facilitated by U.S. President Joe Biden. However, Netanyahu stated that the Palestinians should not have the power to veto the regional deal-making. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman also expressed optimism about a potential deal with Israel. Netanyahu compared the potential peace agreement with Saudi Arabia to the 2020 Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. He hopes that President Biden's administration will be able to secure this agreement, but broad support among U.S. lawmakers would be necessary, which may be difficult to achieve with a presidential election in 2024. Netanyahu acknowledged the need for some accommodation with the Palestinians, but he emphasized that they should not have veto power over peace treaties with Arab states. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas rejected the possibility of peace in the Middle East without the full realization of Palestinian rights. Netanyahu also warned that Iran would attempt to sabotage a deal with Saudi Arabia. However, he highlighted existing signs of normalization, such as the air corridor for Israeli carriers over Saudi territory and Biden's plan to include both countries in a rail and shipping network from India to the Mediterranean Sea. UAW extends walkouts to more plants, but cites progress in Ford talks. New York Times. The United Automobile Workers Union has broadened its strike against General Motors and Stellantis by including all the spare parts distribution centers of the two companies. Around 18,000 UAW members are now striking, and the union has said it will shut down parts distribution centers until the two companies return to the bargaining table. UAW has not expanded the strike at Ford Motor due to progress made in talks with the carmaker. A Saudi-Israeli peace deal? Who wants what and why? Bloomberg. Negotiations are reportedly underway for a groundbreaking deal that would see Saudi Arabia establish warm relations with Israel. The deal would see the U.S. provide security guarantees to Saudi Arabia, while Israel would play a key role in Saudi Arabia's plans to diversify its economy away from oil. In return, Israel would be expected to make concessions to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. The deal would also serve U.S. interests by countering China's influence in the Middle East and allowing the U.S. to regain influence over Saudi oil production. However, the complexities of the negotiations and potential backlash from domestic constituencies pose significant challenges to achieving a deal. UAW reports Tim Scott to Labor Board over "You strike, you're fired" remark. Washington Post. The United Auto Workers, UAW, union has filed a labor complaint against Republican presidential candidate Senator Tim Scott, Republican South Carolina, after he suggested that workers who join a strike against the nation's three biggest carmakers should be fired. Biden trounces Trump in new poll of New Hampshire voters. The Independent. A new poll conducted by CNN and the University of New Hampshire Survey Center shows that if the presidential election were held today, President Joe Biden would easily win New Hampshire's electoral votes. The poll of 2,107 voters in the state found that Biden leads former President Donald Trump by a margin of 52% to 40%. Despite not being allowed to campaign in the state due to Democratic Party rules, Biden also holds a commanding lead among primary voters in New Hampshire, with 78% of Democrats supporting him. This is in contrast to national polls that show Biden tied with or trailing Trump by single-digit margins. However, state-by-state polls show that Biden also leads Trump by similar margins to his victory in the 2020 election. A recent poll of Michigan voters showed Biden with a 3-point lead over Trump. U.S.-China ties should be seen as a long-distance race for mutual gain, Forum told. South China Morning Post. The U.S.-China relationship should not be seen as a rivalry, but rather as a long-distance race that aims to achieve development together, according to Rong Ying, vice president of the China Institute of International Studies. Rong stated during a panel discussion that defining the relationship as a rivalry would imply that there will be a winner and a loser, but it should instead be seen as a competition that promotes development. The remarks come as competition between the two powers intensifies in various areas. Both sides have expressed a desire to manage the competition and avoid conflict. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.